you everybody for joining us today. I am Priya Mana. I am a graduate student at Georgia Tech, and also I'm a research engineer at Pacific Northwest National Lab. And today we are very excited to have with us Dr. Noel Schultz. Dr. Schultz may not need much of an introduction. She's been one of the cornerstone people of Power and Energy Society and the Power and Engineering group in general. But nevertheless, I'll go ahead and give a quick intro. But before that, I quickly want to introduce our other producers and other podcast members as well. So we have Augusto Zanin, who's one of our media and publishing specialist, and we have also behind that IEEE membership, we have Conrad Schmidt, who is also our executive producer, and we have Clinton Goddard, co-producer, and we have a whole team of people, Shani Lynn, Hasala Dhamadena, who helped with all the making this whole thing run. So thank you to all of you. And with that, I will go ahead and get started. I will go ahead and introduce our guest, and we want this to be a very interactive session. So I hope you will all, share your comments, thoughts. Feel free to at any time put it in the chat, raise your hand, I guess, and we will unmute you. So there's a lot of opportunity for interaction. With that, let me go ahead and introduce Dr. Noel Schultz. Dr. Schultz is the Edmund O. Schweizer III Chair in Power Apparatus and Systems in the School of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at Washington State University, Pullman. She's also a chief scientist at Pacific Northwest National Lab and one of the past presidents of IEEE Power and Energy Society. Dr. Schultz has been active for over 27 years in teaching, research, and service at 6 US universities, has brought in over 40 million in external research through individual and collaborative projects, and has graduated many, many master's and PhD students. Other than all of this, this is a very shortened bio, but I will also wanted to add this, that Dr. Schultz has been very involved in activities related to recruitment, retention, and advancement of women and multicultural students and professionals in STEM careers. She's also an advocate for advancing power engineering workforce. So we were all very sure this would be a great fit for our mostly student and young professional, and pretty much for everybody to listen to Noel, her journey, and just have a chat. Welcome, Noel.
Thanks, Priya. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time. And I know it's still early out there at Pacific Northwest, so thank you for joining us. Okay, with that, let's try straight into it. We would all, since I guess mostly everybody is from power and energy background here, we would love to know how you got started and what was your motivation to join this area of work?
Yeah, thanks, Priya. And you can hear me okay? That sounds good? Good.
Yep,
All right.
sounds good. Yeah.
So my father is an electrical engineer, and he actually got his PhD in more machines area. But growing up, he was more of a computer engineer. He worked with manufacturing. And so when I was in middle school, I really like math and science. And when I was in third grade, we did a tour of a manufacturing facility. And I just thought that was the coolest thing, that, they put raw materials in the beginning and they came out at the end and saw different machines and things like that. So that got me interested in math and science and engineering. When I was in middle school, my dad had what's called a Heath kit, and it's a old school where it was like 1,000 parts to make a TV. And so I helped him solder and did things, but I had resistor earrings in middle school where they were great because they're different colors. And so that helped me get interested in electrical engineering. And so I got interested in math. I really like math and science, so I thought electrical engineering would be good. My undergrad, I enjoyed power, but I ended up getting my master's in microelectronics, and then I came back around to power for my PhD, and that's where my career's been since then.
That's awesome to know. And it looks like that gene has gone, of higher education has definitely passed through. I know at least one of your sons is also doing a PhD. So I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah, so we have a pretty nerdy family. So my husband is a chemical engineer, a STEM-based family. My husband's a chemical engineer. We met as undergraduates at Virginia Tech. And then he got his PhD and he's a university administrator. And then our older son, Tim, has his bachelor's and master's in computer science and
Mm,
works for Scythe on cybersecurity, and he and his wife are both cybersecurity experts. And then our younger son, Andrew, is at Georgia Tech, getting his PhD in mechanical engineering. So we have mechanical, electrical, chemical engineering, computer science. So we kind of have our own STEM consulting
I
firm.
know. That's awesome. Guess apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yeah. So I am curious about this. Like back in the day when you were especially doing your PhD, were there many other women in the area?
No, there weren't a lot of women. And actually, my advisor, Dr. Bruce Wallenberg at University of Minnesota, he one day I was having my meeting with him. At the end, he said, "Well, he said I was thinking about it, and I'm an old guy, and I don't really know what it's like to be a young woman in the field, and so I want to connect you with Marisa Crow, who at the time was at Missouri Rolla." And so we got connected via email and connected. We were both dual career. Her husband was also a faculty member. And that was really helpful for me to have somebody else I could talk to.
Mm,
And actually, when I started as a faculty member, I started a group that was the Women Faculty in Power that were at the general meeting. And when we started, there were four of us, and we would have lunch at the general meeting every year. And now that's grown that we have over 30 folks that I invite every year. So we can't do a meal together. So we have a meeting on Wednesday night after the Women in Engineering, Women in Power meeting. We have a meeting where we just get together and talk. So there weren't very many women back then. And there were like four or five of us at the PES meetings for uh, women faculty. And then there were a few in industry, but the numbers weren't very high.
right. No, that's so important to take that step to create that network, and I guess you put some great pointers out there. So for mostly, I mean, young professionals and or students who are thinking of going into this area of academia in general, what would be your tips about finding mentors, or or how your life has, like, how mentorship has helped your life, and if you have any tips to share about peers and mentors?
Yeah, I think, a couple of things. When I talk about peers, talk about mentors and networks, I really think you should have three networks.
Mm,
You should have one network on where you're going, which would be kind of where we would think about mentors,
mm,
one network of your peers, where you are. And then I think you should have a network where you're giving back to those that are coming behind you. And I think that's been, those three networks have been important for me along the way. And I think with where you're going, one of the things I think is important with mentors is that you don't try to find someone that's exactly like you. I think that's can be hard to find someone that's in the same life stage you are, has the same background you have, has the same interests. And so I think it's important when you're looking for mentors to get a couple mentors, not just one, but a couple in different areas to get different input. And when I present on this, I talk about, as engineers and scientists, when we plot a graph, if we had one point, you can plot any point through there. And so I think mentors are the same way. You should get multiple mentors so you have multiple points, and then you can kind of draw your line based on the input of that. So I would encourage you. One of the ways you can do that is um, is as a early career graduate student is you might talk to senior graduate students and early career faculty. One of the things I think is first start off maybe by talking to them about, say, hey, can we have coffee, or can we do a Zoom coffee hour? and just visit a little bit about some of just their advice on, hey, I really like the way you did that presentation. Could you talk to me a little bit more about how you pull your presentation together, or how you do those kind of things? Or, a lot of universities we have alumni networks where there's
Mm.
somebody you can get connected with. And so you might go to a department head or a faculty member and say, hey, I'm really interested in being a faculty member. And could you, talk to me a little bit about those careers? Maybe give me an alum that's come from our program that's early career that I could talk to about his or her or their experience, and then go from there. So, I think with mentors, you have to be proactive, and but look for more than one person, because it's going to be hard to find someone exactly like you out there.
Right. And I mean, that's the way you grow, right? If you are like put in a situation where, or if you are looking at somebody who may or may not be exactly like you, I mean, that's something to seek out for. So that's some great advice, definitely. I was curious how it was when you like, I know even if you have peers and mentors, but then, or even if you prepare yourself to, go out there and uh, go to a certain company, industry, or any of that. I'm sure still there are things that surprise you, or you can't be sure of what all challenges and things will come your way unless you are there. So, do you have any like things from your coming up in the career, things that surprised you, how about research, about academia in general, any of that, or how was that experience?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest challenges when I started my career is um, I tried to get tenure in one semester, and I joke at that, but my expectations for myself were really high, and I didn't, my first summer after I was a faculty, I had like this whole list of things I was going to get done that summer. And my husband, who's a couple years ahead of me in his academic career, he said, if you get a third of those done, I'll be impressed. And I got probably 25% to a third. So, I think one of the important things, a book that's been very helpful for me is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And there's some of the habits in there that have really been really important. One is prioritization. How do you um, prioritize? And there's a cool video that talks about how do you, where you put the most important things in your schedule first, and then you fit the smaller things around that. The other thing I think is important from the 7 habits is to begin with the end in mind, and to look at what your ultimate goal is, and then how do you set up the different activities to do that. I think when you first start, it can be overwhelming to think, well, how am I gonna put a lab together? How am I gonna get my equipment? How am I gonna find grad students? And a faculty career, there's a lot of different aspects to it. And so I think it's really important to kind of write things down, to break things into smaller pieces so they seem a little more doable, and not feel overwhelmed, and not feel that you have to accomplish everything, uh, you know, in 1 month in your
Mhm.
first career, but give yourself a little bit of a break. The other thing I think is really important as you start a career is finding making sure you put time in there for you to recharge. I joke and say, if my cell phone gets to 10%, I'm running for my cord to try to plug it in somewhere. But we don't do that for ourselves, where if we get to 10%, we're tired, then we don't always give ourselves time. So I think it's really important to make sure you set aside some time. And I know sometimes we think, well, we have to work, work, work in our new job, particularly as a faculty member. I got to get everything set up. But after a while, you get run down. Your battery gets low. So find the things that help you recharge, and do some of those, and put those in your schedule, and make sure you're spending time to do those kind of things.
Such an important point. And I mean, I guess right from grad students to every level, I guess there's something to pick up from there. And I think this, I wonder if this gets asked more to women. I hope not, but everybody should be asked this, like, how whether you're a male faculty, female faculty, or anything, like, how do you manage when you're like this whole personal and professional life, and making sure that you can have a a successful, or you feel good about both aspects of your life. I mean, do you personally have any pointers? And then you also mentioned that you both were you had a dual career, so that also puts like makes it has its own complication of moving around and all that. So how has it been for you?
Well, we could talk a whole hour on this topic, but so a couple key things I think are important, and the first thing I think is really important is one of the most important decisions I made for my professional career was my partner, who was supportive of me and my goals and not just his. And I think that's really important as you're thinking about um, in a relationship, that your partner is supportive of your goals and activities. And, um, one of the things, uh, I have some imposter syndrome. I'm not always confident in myself. And I'm fortunate to have a partner that is confident in me and helps me get through those times I'm not sure about myself. And that's been really important. And Kirk was a single dad for 2 years, so I could go get back and get my PhD. We're 325 miles apart, and so that was, having a partner that was willing to be a single dad with a 2-year-old for 2 years, was someone that was willing to work extra hard to help me be successful as well. So I think that's one thing, is to have a partner. The second thing, it just takes a lot of planning for both dual careers and professional and personal activities, is making sure that um, you plan ahead, that I kind of joke and say, if you want to optimize when to have children, you probably wouldn't have children, kind of like the two body problem, right? The optimization. But, I found it very enriching, where there are times of celebrating family, there are times of celebrating work. And I also find that when I get away from work and enjoy time, personal time, it helps my mind rest, or parts of my mind rest. So then I look at problems differently when I get to that next set of problems and things like that. So, I think a couple key things that I think in dual careers are communicating with you and your partner, to make sure you're constantly communicating, and especially as there are transitions in your lives, make sure you continue to communicate. Planning, make sure you're planning on, okay, when are we going to take vacations, or who's going to do what in part of your personal activities, so you can divide and conquer some of those challenges. And then, I think really having a support network around you is really important. And I talk about creating networks, and you need to have a professional and a personal network. And sometimes some people are really fortunate to have family around them as part of that network. Earlier in my career, I had that, but after I finished my PhD, we moved far away from a lot of family. So I had to create networks of friends and colleagues that were part of both my personal network to help, as well as my professional network. So, and I think, just talking to people about their different, find people at your life stage. When I first started my career, there was another woman in the department. Her name was Martha Sloan. She was actually the first woman president of IEEE. So professionally, she was a great person for advice. But she was a widow and was empty nest. And I was an early career, and I had a 1 and 5-year-old. And so we were very different life stages. So find other people at your life stage, or a little bit ahead of you, that can talk to you about things they found that work for them. And same thing with mentors, talk to a bunch of people and then pick and choose the things that will work for you. So one of the things is, I don't like to cook. I'm not a very good cook, and Kirk likes to cook, but when he cooks, he likes to have time, and so we ate out a lot. And that was just something that we said, hey, we're gonna eat out. We're gonna spend time with our kids. talking and restaurants and things like that. So we traded time and money sometimes. And so you're going to have to find some of those trade-offs for yourself.
Communication and making sure everybody's on the same page somewhat, so that we can, or we have limited time after all, so spend that wisely, definitely.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and something I'll use sometimes, particularly for early career faculty, is you know, you only have a certain number of hours in the week. You've got to sleep some. And so you've got to figure out how to optimize that time for yourself. And so that's an important part of planning. And I think something that's important to do, and I've done this with a leadership class, and I've done this with a summer internship, is to keep track of how you use your time during the week. Just keep track of 30-minute segments on how you're using your time and see if you're being strategic. You know, one of the things the Franklin Covey book also talks about, important versus urgent. And we spend a lot of times on urgent activities, and it's really some of the important activities that help us be strategic and do longer term activities. So I'd encourage you to think about, in the Seven Habits book talks about um, that important versus urgent, and how do we get some of those things, like answering emails all the time. That may not be the most important activity for us to be working on. So how do we look at our time, and how do we make the best of it?
Definitely. Yeah, moving from, say, a graduate life. I mean, graduate life has its pluses and minuses itself too, but then from there to academia or any kind of work life, it's quite a difference. So, um, yeah, managing that time, and because graduate life, you can spend your time in one thing or whatever is your own, versus once you are out there in the industry or anywhere, there's just 100 things pulling you in different directions. So I'm sure that needs more and more time management. With that, so like you have spent so much time in academia, but again, you have worked with people in industry and national labs and everything. So how, again, do you have any sort of advice on how these are similar, different, and for our graduate students, if they want to are thinking of which path to go?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to kind of figure out what kind of things you like to do, and then try to find a job that fits what you like to do. And as an undergraduate, I worked for a company that there was one engineer, a small manufacturing company. There was one engineer, and he had to do everything because he was one engineer. And so every day was different, and he liked that. And then I worked for 2 summers for General Motors, and they had a person that all they did were hubcaps in the mechanical engineering, or all they did were windshield wipers. And I just couldn't wake up in the morning and think, oh, I only do windshield wipers, or I need variety in my life. And so, um, but I also was, my family had, my mom was an elementary school teacher, my dad was a faculty member. And so I kind of saw that life. But I think it's important to talk to people in the jobs that you think you want. If there's an opportunity for you to do an internship, I think that's really important. Um, and for you to kind of test drive it and see if it's something you like. And and I think that's something to think about. Um, there are different things you do, and as a faculty member, there are positions now that you can focus more on teaching, you can focus more on research, um, and you can do some of both. There are also, when you look at, excuse me, the national lab, you've got opportunities where um, you can do lots of different projects and be involved in some. And so I think it's really important for you to look at what do you like to do? And what you like to do is different. Are you someone that likes to work on kind of one project and finish it? Are you someone that likes to have a lot of different balls in the air? I was joking with my husband. In the evenings, we usually watch 1 or 2 episodes of something on streaming, and he'll have like 6 different shows he's watching, and he'll watch one episode of each of those. And I like I kind of like to binge stream. So if I want to do two or three of the same episode. So we're different in the way we approach these things, and you need to figure out for yourself what you're comfortable with. And different jobs, and even different jobs within academic and university. One of the things I like to do is I like to organize people. I like to pull teams together. I like to create bridges between people. And so there's some opportunities in administration that are different than being a full, just a researcher and teacher and some of those kind of things. So I think one of the things I'd encourage you to do is talk to people in those jobs, find out what kind of things they do, and try to figure out for yourself what do you want to do, and that can change over your career. You may want to come right out and you've got this great research portfolio, and you think, hey, I want to go into a corporate R&D or national lab and work only in research for a while, and then maybe I'll come back and teach. You may really want to go into a university position and think you want to do that. I've known some people that got their PhD and they want to work in industry a while to kind of look at the application side after working, depending on what their PhD was. So you've got to do you, and you've got to figure out what are some of those things you like to do, and and figure out where those are by talking to different people, finding out, talking to people that recently graduated, what are things they like, what are things they didn't like.
Mm.
I think I saw a question in the chat or Q&A.
Yes, it is. I can read it out. So, Clinton asks, in your experience, what are the most effective and important things an undergraduate student can do to prepare academically, mentally, and technically for further studies in a master's or PhD program?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. I think a couple things, and there's a lot in that question package. I think academically, typically, if you're looking at a master's, that would be with a thesis, um, that I would talk. One of the things I think is important is to talk to the grad students working with a particular faculty member to find out their style, because it's about fit. Some people are really good with theoretical, some really good with hands-on. Some people, most of their students go to industry, some most go to academics. So kind of think about what your path is. And so you can, talk about learning a little bit about your advisor and those things. My dad told me early on when I was a grad student, he said, a PhD is not intelligence, it's endurance, it's resilience. And I think that's, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint for a PhD. You've got to create a plan, implement the plan, research, you run into things. I have, I don't know where it is here in my office, but I have a little saying that said, you find dead ends a lot of times with research, and so it's a little more unpredictable. It's open ended, and I think so. From mentally, I think you have to be prepared. The One of the challenges I see with new grad students sometimes is, they'll come to me and have an answer, and I'll say, well, it's not like in the back of the book we can look and find that answer. Part of a master's or a PhD is creating that new content, going in a new area. So we don't always know the answers. And so you have to be prepared for open-endedness. And that can be hard as an undergraduate, where you use you use Ohm's law, you use an equation, and you do that. And now we're asking for open-ended, and we want you to use your background to think of, can we do this better? I think as an undergraduate, if you can do some undergraduate research in a laboratory with a faculty member, or look at a NSF REU experience, that gives you just research is kind of, it's like I was talking about, test drive it as an undergraduate and make sure it's what you want to do. And, I think for me, my master's degree was important because when I got out of undergrad, I felt I was like a millimeter deep and a mile wide, because I knew a little bit about a lot of things. And my graduate degree really helped me learn more about a couple different areas for my master's, and then my PhD even more about an area. So, I think, so from an academic standpoint, I think to kind of think about what areas you're interested in and try to get, take a broad variety of classes to figure out what really resonates with you. Mentally to make sure you have networks and support systems, because some days you're not gonna be sure about your advisor. I talk about advisors as like academic parents, that you love them sometime, you're not so happy with them sometime, and so you've got to be mentally prepared for that. And sometimes there's tough love from an advisor on, hey, we need that. And then, try to experience it as undergrad research at REU, or even take some many universities, you can take a special topics class that you can do undergrad research, and then you can do some things. So test drive it, kick the wheels a little bit to see if research is something you really want to do, and and do what you think is right for you. So Clinton, does that answer your question?
Okay, he gives a big thank you. But yeah, Clinton,
Good.
if you have more to ask, please do, put in the chat or unmute yourself. We have one more question from Rabia from on a earlier topic. Uh, what would you suggest women with young kids to manage career and life at home?
I think a couple things that with young kids that you want to think about. One thing that I did was, with younger kids, they're awake at different times than you are. So a lot of times I would leave work and then play and interact with them, and then come home and then after I put them to bed, I would work. And so that can be tiring at times, but I think it's important to be able to have that time together with them and enjoy them along the way. I would say another important thing are find ways in academics. One of the great thing about academics is you can include your children in your activities. Our boys went to student meetings, they went to open houses, they came to laboratory events and things that we did at the university. So it really gave them a chance to be around people, and so involve your kids in some of the things that you do in an academic environment. That works out really well. Um, I think some other things with young kids is, um, one of the things sometimes we try to take care of kids and try to work at the same time, and that can be really challenging. We've seen during COVID, there are a lot of challenges with doing that. So, um, one of the things you want to try to do is look at how do you have some focus time on your work and then play time, and how do you make sure. One of my challenges was when I was working, I felt guilty I wasn't with my sons. When I was with my sons, I was guilty I wasn't working, and so I wasn't making the most of that moment. So try to separate those times and focus on what was happening in that moment. And I think it's also get support systems, and if there daycares that can help, and financially you can afford that, so that you can focus on your work at certain times, and then and other times work with your kids, um, but enjoy them along the way. And I think that's really important. It's They grow up soon, they grow up quickly. Find ways to, that was one of the things we used to do when we would eat out, is we would play math games or science games while we were waiting for food to come. And we would interact and enjoy those kind of activities. So, I think when our kids were little, I would volunteer in their classrooms, and sometimes I teach about math and science, and sometimes I would just help the teacher and do those kind of things so I could help out and along the way. So, I think it's important to find ways to interact um, with your kids, whether it's through different organizations, and be part of what they do. But I think the most important thing was when I got comfortable that when I'm at work, I didn't feel guilty. And when I was at home, I didn't feel guilty, but I could lay that on the side. So,
Awesome. We have a okay. I'll come back to the other questions in a minute. But since you brought up COVID, I just did want to touch on that. It has impacted all of us in some way or the other. How do you think teaching and mentoring in general has changed in your own personal style or and overall in general, in addition to the the technical aspects of many of them being online and so on.
yeah, I miss seeing people. So I'm an extrovert and I like interacting with people. Um, and I found ways to do some during COVID, um, before we had Zoom fatigue or screen fatigue. We had some happy half hours where we would get together and just talk as our research group um, on what's happening with our families and what
Mm.
TV shows we're watching and what new hobby we have now because of COVID. And I need that interaction. So, I think mentoring, there are opportunities for different opportunities now with mentoring because you don't have to be in this. We're now all comfortable with this. So I can mentor someone that's anywhere in the world. We can hop on Zoom and talk for 30 minutes and just, see. So from that perspective, it's really opened up your mentors because it
Mm.
doesn't have to be someone down the hall. And I think that can be really good because if there's not someone exactly like you, either at your university or when you start your job, there are people you can connect. I know a lot of folks that connect with people they went to high school with now through and friends from where they grew up. So we've learned to do that. But I think the part I miss most about COVID was conferences where you bump into someone in the hall, or you
Mm.
go have coffee, or you go have lunch, and that you interact and you're able to talk about different topics.
Mm.
The other thing I think is challenging with COVID is it's harder to talk about tough things when you don't have with new people. It's
Mm.
harder, if you and I just met for the first time and we have to talk about a difficult issue or we have a technical problem that we disagree on. It's harder when you I think it's harder and part of that's probably my generation. I'm in my mid 50s, so I'm pretty much old enough to be most students' moms, traditional students' moms now. That I think it's harder for me because I can't always see the body language. I can't always, see the big picture. And so that was a hard part of mentoring. But I think some of the advantages of access and some of that provide us a real opportunity. So, but I think we also have to be kind to ourselves. And I think that's one of my big challenges during COVID is I expected myself to work at the same pace I did pre-COVID when I'm online instead of face to face and tired of screens and some of that stressed out about worrying about family and friends health and some of that. So
Mm.
I think the biggest thing we have to do is give ourselves a break. um and kind of I have bigger problems on my expectations of myself that I'm sometimes my worst enemy on what I expect to do. And so it goes back to kind of recharging and energy and mental health is important and making sure we're not only taking care of our physical health but our mental health. And I think it's really important. I go to counseling at different times in my life, and um, I think our mental health is really important. And I'd encourage you to use mental health resources, and we all have different needs at different times. We all have ups and downs. We're kind of like the grid. We have ups and downs,
Mhm. Mm.
and what that frequency is, and highs and lows. But get help, whether it's at a university counseling center, other counseling resources. There are a lot of telehealth and other resources now use those resources in those times, because we've all had times where we're not sure we're good enough for a PhD or master's, or I didn't do well in that test. Am I good enough for this? So I use those mental health resources to help you get through those times. And I think COVID has just brought to our forefront, and we talk a lot more about mental health than we did 3
Definitely,
years
yeah.
ago. And particularly for graduate students, I think it can be a challenging time, but if you can use mental health resources, if you can have a network of people to support you, then those are things that are going to help you get through those challenges.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. Like it's not talked enough, and that's something I'm not sure how many students even make use of those resources. So I hope those who are listening today, if you haven't already, please do check in with your university. There are a lot of many universities do provide really good resources. I hope some of the things that you mentioned helped answer Raul's question too, but he had a more specific question on how to find professional mentors in his particular field of work, and looks like his thesis was in artificial intelligence and power systems.
Yes, so my PhD was actually in artificial intelligence and power systems. I did an expert system to do switching of the grid to try to automate the switching process so they didn't have to handwrite switching orders for doing maintenance and repairs. So, I think one of the things, this kind of goes back, this is a great example of my point that if you try to find someone in artificial intelligence and power systems that is in exactly in your field, that's going to be hard, because to find someone that might be exactly like you are. But if you try to say, hey, I'm going to try to find a couple artificial intelligence folks, I'm going to find some power system folks, and then that broadens your horizons, because maybe an artificial intelligence person doesn't know about power systems, but they know about other topics that will be new to you and help you learn about an area and do things. And you find a power systems person who knows things in different areas and can help you expand. So I think a couple different things, artificial intelligence and power systems. One of the things I would do, and I would do this on any of your areas, is I would look at, you can go into IEEE Explore, and I would take your topic and find a couple people that are your papers, that are the people that you've when you're doing your literature review, look at people that show up a lot in that area. And then at a conference, I would go up to them and say, I really respect your papers, or hey, you wrote this cool book that we use in a class, and I was just wondering if I could have coffee with you and pick your brain a little bit about where you see the hot topics going. And I was fortunate. Uh, had a very senior advisor, Bruce Wallenberg from University of Minnesota, who'd written textbooks, and I was talking to a National Science Foundation program manager, and he said, Noel, don't do exactly what Bruce did, because Bruce is senior, and if your proposal's there and Bruce is there, he's got a lot more experience. And so if a reviewer looks at it, he said, you need to find something that builds on what you learned from Bruce, but it's your own niche, and that you can do, that you use your contributions and you show. And I thought that was really good advice from the program manager about talking and I talked to him about two or three different areas, and he said, well, do this one because it's more further away, but it uses your background, and that would be good. So I think, back to what I said earlier, I think find some people in artificial intelligence, talk to them about what's the future of artificial intelligence, where do they see AI, machine learning going, what are some things that you should be thinking about, talk to some people in power systems, and you know, then look at where the overlaps with some of those that interest you, and then you can do even searches more on those and find other mentors that might be more in your area. But by getting mentors that aren't exactly what you are, then that helps you expand your horizon and what you learn.
That's a very interesting point. You brought up about like talking to about grant and writing research funding. I know you've managed a lot of big projects and things like that. So do you again, what's some of the, like, from personal experience, to some of the things that surprised you there, and also like how you learned from that, and any advice that you have with managing such big projects.
Yeah, so the first thing is when you get your reviews back of your rejected proposal, you read them and then you put them in a file folder and you come back to them a week later when you can be objective and really look at them. And I think one of the most important things is to, when you write a proposal, is to understand the audience and to make sure, particularly if you're doing the National Science Foundation or DOE, government agencies, make sure you answer every question that's in the proposal. And if the proposal says you need to do background, then create a section that says background. If it says, impact, create a section, make it easy for the reviewer to be able to check off that you've done the things that they were asked. I also found, a picture's worth 1,000 words. How do you use pictures? I'm a visual learner. Pictures help me visualize things. And so how do you take your ideas and put them in a picture? I think the other thing is a lot of universities now have resources. Like if you're doing an NSF Career Award, they'll have people that will review them for you. And a lot of universities, their Office of Research will have actually programs to help you write your first proposal. They'll have workshops you can do. Take advantage of those. Don't feel like you have to do everything by yourself. And my son, my older son, when he was an undergraduate, I would say, "Are you going to office hours?" He goes, "Well, I'm smart enough. I shouldn't have to go to office hours." And, I see early career faculty that say, "Well, I know how to do this, so I don't need to go to those workshops." And I take advantage of those professional development opportunities. It gives you a chance to be in a room with other early career faculty. You may find someone to collaborate with. B, it gives you a chance to interact with senior faculty that are running the workshops or coordinating them, and that's a resource that's there. So I think use the resources that are there at your university. One of the first things I would do is when you come to university, set up a meeting with the Office of Research. Talk to a mentor, your department head, and say, who are the important people in the Office of Research for my area? Go and set up a meeting with them. Talk to them about put a one pager together and go to your associate dean for research in your college and say, hey, I'm working in this area. And if you see any proposals or if you hear of anything, if you can let me know about that, that would be great. Offer to do presentations at departments that relate to what you're, for Dr. Dabo, offer to give a talk in CS in the seminar series. Offer to give a talk in the power systems where you can meet other people. They can learn about your work and they can add you to their teams related to proposals and some of that. So, so I think if I kind of go back, I think it's important that you look at the request for proposals and you actually hit all the points specifically, by sections, and make sure every question they ask is in there. Follow directions, font size, margins, all those kind of things. And then another thing I think is important is if you can get someone, maybe if your partner or family member isn't in your field, exactly in your field, have them read it. Because remember, when you write proposals, not everybody's the expert you are. So you've got to make sure it's general enough that audiences can understand that. One last thing, there are a lot of differences with industry if you're writing a proposal and academic and federal government. So if you are interested in industry, the power industry is a great place, and we're very fortunate. We have a lot of opportunities both with DOE to partner with industry, but a lot of electric utilities and manufacturers will work with you. So find someone that's good at writing industrial proposals. Get an example of that proposal. I've over my career, when I had an NSF Career Award, if anybody emailed me and said, "Can you have it?" or people email me and say, "Hey, Noel, I see you have this O&R project. Could you send me an example?" So ask people for those examples. Some people might not give it to you, but a lot of them are more than willing to give it to you so you can see different ways that they do things.
It's good to know. Awesome. So we have a few other questions, but I would more or less okay. So Rabbi has another question of if you have suggestions of other inspirational talks or books like these, or that have helped you. I know you mentioned the 7 habits. Is there anything else that you have found particularly useful?
Yeah, so I think a really good a book for women in STEM, I think is Lean In by
Mm.
Sheryl Sandberg. I think, and actually that's a good book for all people. She really talks about leadership and being involved. And another good book I like is called Thrive by Adriana Huffington. And that really talks a little bit about work-life balance and how do we talks about exercise. It talks about taking time for yourself, sleep, and how do we balance that with how we've become careers and things like that. The 7 habits I think is important. I mentioned that and have talked through that. Um, I also think another tool is the Strength Finders. It's a Strength Finders is by Gallup, and you do a survey, and there's a book that goes with it that can help you with that. There are classes out there as well. But, I think one of the things is that I've found, particularly with groups, is understanding my strengths and understanding their strengths and how we see things differently. And don't try to put a round peg in a square hole because I have a team member that likes to do something or doesn't like to do something. And so I think Strength Finders has been a resource for me along the way. Um, I'm trying to think of what are some other books that those are probably, Strength Finders, 7 Habits, uh, the Lean In was an important book, and then Thrive. And there's some TED Talks out there on those. There's also some Lean In. There are actually some circles you can get involved in, kind of like IEEE chapters or student groups. There are different groups virtually that you can get involved in. So those are some things that come to mind just off the top of my head.
That's a great resources. Awesome. Awesome. Also, I wanted to quickly touch upon this as well, since you have done like you have your career path has taken research focus as well as maybe on the administrative sides as well. Is that something, yeah, you again? I know you mentioned you are a people's person and you like bringing groups together, and so I'm sure that had an impact on that. Uh, I was curious, like, is that something you? I'm sure the pivots happened as they happened, but is that something you worked on throughout your career overall, or how do students know if that's something either of those paths, and how can they make it work for them or prepare for that?
Well, I think it's important that you kind of figure out, there's some students that when you become a faculty member, there's lots of different routes you can do and lots of different things. And even in industry, right? And even at the national labs, right? You have a technical leadership track and a more technical track. You see that at companies where you have, leadership and people that are more, leading, pulling teams together, helping do that. So, um, I think for me, I, I enjoy helping, for me, getting groups together and helping them achieve. One of the things that's great about being a faculty member is, teaching a class and seeing the light bulb come on in the student as the semester goes. Being a PhD or master's mentor, seeing an unsure student come in and then seeing this expert student at the end of it come in and do their defense, and they know the most about everything, and they have papers and they have presentations, and they seeing them basically as an academic mom, seeing them grow up and
Mhm.
do that. And so I, I think I want to see people succeed, and I want develop programs to help people succeed. And so whether that's a leadership program to help grad students think about leadership and what are their leadership skills and how do they contribute, either in a technical leadership or in teams, and working on that. And there weren't people around that had that interest, and so I started networks for women in engineering at 3 different universities, because I was kind of selfish. I wanted to have a network, and so I started it to get it going, and then it created some momentum for others. And after I left, they continued, which is great. So I got as much joy out of helping other people achieve as I did with my own personal achievements. And so with that, creating networks for people, creating bridges or connections, and saying, hey Priya, have you met this person? Or those kind of things really
Mhm.
are, hey, you're doing research in this area, have you talked to this faculty member? He or she'd be a great member of your committee. If I can help that person in what they're doing, and then that's great for me. That's joy, brings me joy. And so I think for me, that's where the administration came in, is um I I'm a people person, and so uh I think being able to do electrical engineering and people is what it's great about a faculty. And then administration is just that next step up. And quite often what happens in academics is you see a leader, you see a department head, and you think, well, I could do that job. I can do as good a job as they are. Maybe I can do better than they are. And so you get interested in doing that. And so I think, I use this example with IEEE PES is, you know, you first start out, you're a committee member, and then uh, in the I was in a committee, and then after I worked on it for a year or two, I became the chair of the committee, and then they asked me. So I think, taking on little more and more projects and seeing what you like to do. I mean, do you like organizing of activities and helping the broader group, or do you like being the team member that's on the technical side, that's in the technical side all the time? And you can see different people like that. Some people can bounce between those, but normally most of us will have one or the other. So um and that's what, being that's how I got to be PES president, was having the opportunity to start as a committee member, then become the chair of the committee, then move into a higher position, then be a awards. I did all the awards for PES, and then they asked me to run for secretary. I got that. I was elected that. And then, it keeps, but one of the things I found, particularly in volunteer organizations like IEEE and PES, I've gotten way more out, even though I've spent a lot of time in those organizations. What I've gotten back from that is way more than I've gotten into it. I've had met people, I've had opportunities to learn, and all of those have just been pretty amazing.
Awesome. No, that's yeah, no, I mean, being you've been like, been there, such a important figure throughout, and it's a great thing for us, like the young engineers, to look up to as well, and whether it's at IEEE PS front or academic front, and yeah, all of them. We are at the top of the hour. I know I got like a
Somebody
request
asked if we
and a
answered their
question.
question.
Exactly. So I'm gonna just point out that, and it's a very specific question. So if you would rather point them out to someone else, or feel free to. This is Mansoor, who says their research focused on UAV, unmanned aerial surveillance system. So so if you wanna give your thoughts on that, or if you have any roadmap for that, or you think yeah, what's the new thing, or what's the big thing in that area? Stu.
Yeah, so I think that's a great example of, there's different aspects to what we do. Like there's artificial intelligence or UAVs, um, where UAVs can be a tool for looking at other opportunities. Like I read an article this recently that uh, one of our ag researchers found out they could use UAVs to scare away birds from crops. That they could,
Mm,
by having UAVs kind of go at certain times, they could help reduce the loss of fruit. And I was like, who would have thought about cherries and UAVs, right?
mm,
And
mm,
and so I think there's a couple different aspects. There's the UAVs and figuring out how to make the best UAV for, and then there's the different purposes for UAVs, whether it's to scare away animals, whether it's to do instead of fireworks, you have a UAV show at Disney World. Whether there's delivering Amazon packages or different
mm,
packages and things like that. So I think in each of those areas, you want to think outside the box of, do you want to be more involved in the technology or in the application side, or a little bit of both? Because having your foot in both of those, the application side and the technology side, you can go in both ways. It's kind of like I said earlier about getting some mentors in AI and getting some mentors in power system. It helps expand your overall knowledge by doing those kind of things. So I think those are so I think in the UAVs, there's the sky is the limit on some of those things. If you look at, what we're talking about with machine learning and AI and what we're going to do, I think UAVs, there's also a lot of different applications, and we're just scratching the surface. And so by getting out there and learning about things, and this kind of goes to my, what I talked about proposals earlier, finding something that's kind of unique and taking a technology or application and applying it to a new area, that is we talk about cybersecurity and power systems, right? there's a lot
mm.
um, there's a lot going talk right now about control systems and cybersecurity, not just your desktop computer. And so there's a lot of things we can learn from all that.
Definitely an exciting time. Like there's just so many.
It's a great time to be a power engineer.
Definitely.
So
Awesome. So I think that closes most of the questions. So again, thank you all for your questions. Thank you for the very interactive session. And yeah, thank you so much, Noel, for taking the time. I know you're super busy, so this means a lot to us. Um,
Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for your leadership to do something cool like this. I think it's a really neat opportunity. And it's one of the things that COVID has brought to us is the opportunity to connect across the world. And I'm on LinkedIn, and you can find my email on Twitter. I mean, I'm on Twitter, and you can find my email. So if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. It may take a time or two to email me just to get me, but be persistent, like the folks here, Priya and others were, to get me on this. So best wishes to everybody, and go and do great things, but make sure you have some fun along the way.
Thank you so much, Noel. We'll stick by those
Thank
words.
you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.